All right, so today is still Wednesday, the 15th of February. We are going to be looking at our homework from yesterday. We watched a video online, hopefully. If you did not watch the video, sorry, I guess I gotta turn on the screen, don't I?
Mm-hmm.
If you did not see the video yesterday, this was the website, or the address, I should say, not a website. Do you have it written down somewhere? If you don't, could you write this down?
Sorry.
If you don't have this written down somewhere, could you write this down? And you're not going to need a red pen for your homework. That's why I'm actually showing it on the screen today, or on the camera, I should say. So you're not going to need a red pen to grade your homework today, okay? But I do want you to write down this particular video address. So yesterday we were completing the square, and it was my fault that maybe some of you took it a little farther than what I really intended for you to do. Because the video actually took you all the way to solving, right? Video took you all the way to solving, and that wasn't my intention. My intention for this video was just to get you to put the equation into the completing the square format, rather than taking it all the way to the end and solving. So, creating that perfect square was really the goal of yesterday's homework. And if you did that, I'll wait just a second. Some people are still writing. We good? Yeah? I think that's it. I think you got it?
Yeah.
All right. So if you did that on the 5 problems that I assigned, this is really what I was looking at. I was looking to see if you could get to this point, where you have this a plus 7 in parentheses squared. Mr. Price, were you here yesterday? Do you have this paper? Go ahead and take it. You can write it down. So I really wanted you to get to this format, this a plus 7 in parentheses squared equals 100. This x minus 6 in parentheses squared equals 25. This x plus 3 in parentheses squared equals 1. This x minus 1 in parentheses squared equals 4. And this last one here on number 7, this x plus 7 in parentheses squared equals 64. That's really where I wanted you to get to. We're going to do one of these problems from scratch, just so you can see how it turned out to be that. So if you look at number 4, here, make that a little bit bigger. So we can see it a little better. There we go. The idea is to make this trinomial a perfect square. Okay? We're going to have to add something to it to make it a perfect square. So our first step when you're using completing the square format is to first make sure that this leading coefficient is 1. 1x squared, right? If it's anything other than 1, J, before we can start, we need to divide everything by that number. So if this started off with 3x squared, before we could use this format, we'd have to divide everything by 3. Okay. Our second step would be to move the constant to the right side of the equation. This constant we would move to the right. So let's all do that. So if we're going to move that to the right, we have x squared minus 12x equals a negative 11. And you get a negative 11 on the right hand side because what you're doing is you're subtracting 11 from both sides. So if I subtract 11 over here, it becomes 0. And if I take 0 and I minus 11, I get negative 11. Okay. But completing the square format says that we are going to add something to the left side to make it a perfect square. And if I add something to the left side, I have to add that same something to the right side. So how do we know what to add? That's really the question, right? How do we know what to add?
Divide the negative 12 by 2 and square it.
Yeah. So the way we figure out what to add is we take half of this negative 12, which is negative 6, and then we're going to square it. So half of this squared. So negative 6 squared is positive 36. And that's why this is always plus and never a minus sign. Because when you have a positive and you square it, it's going to be a plus. And when you have a negative number squared, it's going to be a positive as well. So if we have negative 6 squared, we get 36. So we're going to add 36 to both sides. When we do that, we create this as a perfect square trinomial. And I know it's a perfect square trinomial because the first term is a perfect square. X squared is a perfect square. 36 is a perfect square. And if I take the square root of this term, which is x, and the square root of this term, which is 6, right? Multiply them together, I get 6x. Multiply that times 2, I get 12x. So that tells me it's a perfect square trinomial. And I write it as the square root of the first term, square root of the last term, and whatever this sign is right here goes here. Actually, I shouldn't say square root of the last term because that's incorrect. That'd be incorrect. You don't take the square root of this, you take half of this, which would be negative 6. Okay? You take half of this. It's going to turn out to be the same thing, but it's half of this. And that way you get your sign with it. Half of negative 12 is negative 6. That's squared. Equals what's on the other side, and negative 11 plus 36 is 25. So that's really the part that I wanted you to understand going into today. Okay, that part right there. How do I get this? Any questions on how to get that? All right, turn your paper over. Because on this side of the paper, what we're going to do is we're going to write down this problem. The problem is y squared plus x squared plus 4x minus 4y minus 1 equals 0. This is where we want to be. This is what we want to do. What we're going to do is we're going to write the equation of a circle using completing the square formats. Okay? Before we can do that, we're going to put this in order. We're going to start with our x squared. We're going to keep our x's together. And then we're going to go to our y squareds. We're going to keep our y's together. And then write our constant. As long as you keep the sign with it, you can move it wherever you want it to go, as long as you don't cross the equal sign. Yes, ma'am?
Will completing the square be on the benchmark?
It will be on the benchmark and it will be on your test. Both. Got it? So, rewriting this is going to be x squared plus 4x, because I'm going to keep those together, plus y squared minus 4y minus 1 equals 0. All we did was just rewrite that. We just kind of grouped the things together that we wanted together, I just rewrote it. So now we're going to approach it the same way we did yesterday's homework. We're going to move the constant now to the other side. So we're going to move this -1 to the other side. So now we have x squared plus 4x plus y squared minus 4y equals +1. If you look at this part of the homework, that part right there, that's what we did yesterday. If we separate this out, that's what we did yesterday. So what we're doing now is we're going to do 2 completing the square problems at the same time in the same problem. We're going to make this a perfect square trinomial. We're going to make this a perfect square trinomial. So that means that we have to add something to that one to make that happen. And we have to add something to that one to make that happen. And that's going to equal 1 plus the first thing we're adding over here, plus the second thing we're adding over there. I'm going to make that a little lighter. There we go. Okay. And you find it the same way. Half of this is, and 2 squared is, half of this is -2, and -2 squared is 4. Yeah, it'd be 4. So I'm going to add the same thing to the other side. So we added 4 first, then we added 4 again. Here's where it turns into the equation of a circle. I'm going to write this as a perfect square. It's the square root of this term, so we have x and half of this term, plus 2 squared, plus square root of that term, minus half of that term, the minus 2, in parentheses squared, equals 9. We'll pick up on this one where we left off tomorrow, and we'll go from there. Okay?